Henry Clark, a quiet garbage man known for his routine, shocked his entire community when the woman he'd loved for years, his wife Linda, vanished, and the trail to her final resting place led straight to the back of his own truck. Henry Clark had spent the last 2 decades waking before dawn, pulling on his work boots, and driving the familiar route of his garbage truck. It was a job most people overlooked, but it paid the bills and gave him a certain rhythm to life. Every morning began with the rumble of the engine, the smell of diesel, and the creak of the hydraulic arms lifting bins into the compactor. At home, things seemed fine, or at least, that's what he told himself. His wife, Linda, kept the house in order, managed the bills, and often stayed home while Henry worked long hours. But lately, something felt off. It was subtle at first, like a faint odor you can't quite place, lingering in the air. Linda had changed. She seemed more distant, less interested in small talk over dinner. She had started dressing up more often, even for simple errands, wearing makeup and clothes she hadn't touched in years. Her phone became an extension of her hand, and she would tilt the screen away if Henry happened to glance at it. She laughed at things he couldn't hear, texting late into the night under the covers. He noticed she had started going out more, claiming to meet friends or run errands, always at times when he couldn't join her. Henry tried to convince himself it was nothing. After all, people change with time. But the doubt sat heavy in his chest. On his garbage route he found himself distracted, barely noticing the routine motions of lifting, dumping, and compacting. At night he would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if the woman he had shared his life with for years was keeping something from him. He thought about the promises they had made, the quiet mornings they had shared, and the countless sacrifices he had made to keep their home running. The thought that she could betray him was something he didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. One Tuesday afternoon, his suspicion grew sharper. He had come home earlier than usual after finishing his route ahead of schedule. The street was quiet, but there was a car parked near his driveway he didn't recognize. Its engine was off, but the windows were slightly fogged. He walked inside, immediately catching a scent that wasn't his, a strong, unfamiliar cologne that seemed to hang in the air. Linda was in the kitchen, her hair slightly messy, cheeks flushed as though she had been rushing. She barely acknowledged him, muttering something about needing to run to the store, and hurried past him without meeting his eyes. Henry stood in the living room for a long moment after she left, his pulse pounding. The image of the strange car outside and the scent of cologne in his own home burned into his mind. He thought about the way she had avoided eye contact, the way she had brushed past him as if she couldn't get away fast enough. That night, while she slept, he sat in the dim light of the kitchen staring at nothing, piecing together every small detail from the past few months. The picture forming in his mind was one he didn't want to see, but it felt impossible to deny. From that day forward, Henry's mornings no longer began with quiet focus on his work. They began with a gnawing need for answers. He started paying closer attention to her habits, noting the time she and the excuses she gave. Each day brought a heavier sense of dread, as though the truth was circling closer, waiting for the moment it would finally strike. The man who had spent his life hauling away other people's garbage now felt as if his own life was filling up with something rotten, and he didn't yet know how to get rid of it. Henry's search for the truth began quietly, almost without him realizing it. He didn't confront Linda or demand answers. He simply started watching. He kept track of when she left the house, how long she was gone, and the excuses she gave. He memorized the names of the friends she claimed to visit, the stores she said she was shopping at. The more he watched, the more the inconsistencies piled up. She would say she was going to the grocery store, yet return hours later with only a few small items. She'd leave in casual clothes, but come back looking like she had just stepped out of a salon. On his garbage route he began adjusting his timing, finishing certain streets faster so he could swing by areas he thought Linda might be visiting. It was easy to disguise his surveillance. After all, his truck could be anywhere in the city without drawing suspicion. At first the search yielded nothing. She was careful, almost too careful, and he wondered if she had already sensed his suspicion. But Henry was patient. He knew that secrets always had a way of slipping into the open when people got comfortable. The break came on a Wednesday afternoon. Henry was covering a route on the edge of town, one that passed by a small roadside motel. The place was old and run down, its paint peeling and on half lit. As he drove by, His eyes caught something that made his stomach tighten. Linda's car parked outside one of the rooms. He slowed his truck, pulling into a side street where he could see without being noticed. The blinds in the motel room were drawn shut, but he didn't need to see inside to know what was happening. He waited there for over an hour, the steady hum of the garbage truck idling in the background. Finally, the door to the room opened. Linda stepped out, her hair slightly disheveled, her heel wide. Behind her was a man Henry recognized immediately. Mark Ellis, a neighbor who lived only a few streets away. Mark was married with 2 children, and often waved at Henry when they passed each other in the mornings. The sight of him now standing so close to Linda ignited something deep in Henry's chest. They didn't notice him. They walked to their cars, laughing, touching each other in ways that made Henry's vision narrow. He stayed perfectly still, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Every part of him wanted to step out and confront them, to drag the truth into the open right there in the parking lot. But he didn't. He stayed in the shadows, letting the moment sear itself into his memory. He knew he would need time, not just to process what he had seen, but to decide what to do about it. That night, Henry lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Linda was next to him, breathing evenly, her phone resting face down on the nightstand. He thought about every small change in her behavior, every unexplained absence, every time she had lied to his face. The motel parking lot replayed in his mind over and over, each repetition stoking the fire inside him. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal, it was the humiliation. He pictured neighbors whispering, friends smirking behind his back, everyone knowing that his wife had been sneaking around with someone from their own community. The next morning, Henry drove his route in silence. His hands moved automatically, lifting bins, dumping trash, compacting waste. But his mind was elsewhere, locked on the image of Linda and Mark walking out that motel. He no longer felt like a man searching for answers. Now he had them. What he needed next was a plan, and in the quiet hum of the garbage truck, he began to imagine exactly how it would unfold. Henry's thoughts became sharper in the days that followed, each one cutting deeper into the life he once knew. The moment in the motel parking lot had erased any trace of doubt, leaving only the hard, cold truth. Linda had betrayed him, and she had done it with someone who lived just streets away. The betrayal wasn't just private, it was public, an open wound in the middle of the small community they both belonged to. Every time Henry drove his garbage route past familiar houses, he imagined the neighbors knowing, whispering, laughing behind closed doors. The humiliation was like acid, eating away at his patience. He didn't lash out immediately. Instead, Henry began to study his own routines, looking for the cracks where something else could slip in unnoticed. His work gave him a kind of access most people didn't think about. The garbage truck was large, loud, and always moving, blending into the background of daily life. It went places other vehicles couldn't pass, through alleys and industrial sites without drawing suspicion. Most importantly, once something was tossed into the compactor, it was gone, crushed and buried within hours. Henry knew these details better than anyone, and now they no longer felt like just parts of his job. They felt like opportunities. In his mind, the plan began to take shape. It wouldn't be impulsive. It would be careful, precise, and silent. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that his hin truck was the key. He could dispose of something or someone without leaving a trace. The landfill alone was vast, a graveyard of discarded things where even large objects vanished within whiz. If he timed it right, no one would ever find what he put there. Henry started making small adjustments to his schedule. He practiced moving large, heavy items into the truck quickly and quietly, using his shifts to refine the method without drawing attention. He learned the spots on his route where cameras didn't reach, where shadows swallowed the truck from view. Every movement was rehearsed in his mind until it felt as natural as lifting a bin. At home, he watched Linda more closely than ever. He noticed when she slept deeply, when she stayed up late scrolling through her phone, when she left the house for long stretches without explanation. He memorized the times when she was most vulnerable. He also watched Mark Ellis from a distance. If Linda's lover noticed, he didn't show it. Henry saw him mowing his lawn, playing with his kids, walking his dog, living as if nothing was wrong. That false sense of normalcy only made Henry's resolve stronger. The final push came one night when Linda returned home, well past midnight, her clothes slightly rumpled, her hair smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't Henry's. She didn't bother explaining where she had been, moving around the house with casual indifference. Henry sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee, his eyes following her every move. In that moment he felt something inside him harden completely. There would be no confrontation, no screaming match, no attempt at reconciliation. Over the next few days, he prepared in silence. He checked the truck, ensuring the compactor was working perfectly. He gathered heavy-duty plastic sheeting from the supply shed and tucked it away in a place where no one would notice. He waited for the right morning, one when Linda would be groggy from a late night and the neighborhood would still be asleep. The plan was no longer just an idea. It was ready, and Henry knew that when the time came, there would be no going back. The morning Henry had been waiting for came quietly. The air was cool, the street outside still and empty, and a faint mist clung to the grass. He had woken before his alarm, lying in the dark, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of Linda's breathing. Every detail of the plan replayed in his mind, each step mapped out with precision. He knew her habits well enough to predict that she would sleep late after another unexplained night out. That gave him the window he needed. He moved through the house in silence, already dressed in his work uniform. In the dim light of the kitchen, he pulled on his gloves and checked the bundle of heavy-duty plastic sheeting he had prepared days earlier. The garbage truck was parked 2 streets away, hidden in a spot where no early riser could see it. Henry's pulse was steady. This wasn't a moment for hesitation. When he entered the bedroom again, Linda stirred but didn't wake fully. The soft creak of the floorboard and his shadow falling across her were the last things she registered. Henry worked quickly. Every movement mimicked it in his mind 100 times before. There was no shouting, no words exchanged, just the quiet struggle that ended as abruptly as it began. In minutes, her body lay still. The reality of what he had done didn't hit him in waves or with a burst of panic. Instead, it was a cold, heavy certainty. The line had been crossed and there was no undoing it. He laid the plastic sheeting on the floor and rolled her onto it, wrapping it tightly and securing it with thick tape. The sound of the tape tearing seemed unnaturally loud in the stillness of the house. He lifted her carefully, adjusting his grip to make the weight more manageable. The front door stayed shut. Instead, he slipped out through the back, taking the narrow side path between the house and the fence. The street was deserted. Henry carried the bundle to a spot where the garbage truck was hidden, the muted rumble of its idling engine greeting him like an accomplice. The compactor's metal mouth was open, ready. He heaved the bundle inside, the heavy thud echoing in the empty morning. Without hesitation, he engaged the mechanism. The compactor roared to life, pressing down with mechanical force, crushing everything beneath its weight. The sound was deafening, but to Henry it felt final. Afterward, he climbed into the driver's seat and began his route as if it were any other day. Bin after bin tipped into the truck, layer upon layer of household waste piling on top of what he had hidden. Every stop made the load heavier, every rotation of the compactor burying it deeper. To anyone watching, it was just another garbage run, nothing out of the ordinary. He waved at a jogger, nodded to an elderly man sweeping his driveway, all while carrying a secret no one could see. By mid-morning the truck was full, and Henry drove to the landfill. The vast expanse stretched out before him, mounds of trash in every direction, the air thick with the smell of decay. He backed the truck into position, released the compactor, and watched as the load slid out in a massive heap. There was no pause, no moment of reflection. He knew what would happen next. Bulldozers would spread the waste, burying it under fresh layers of refuse, until it was indistinguishable from everything else. When he left the landfill, the morning mist had burned away, and the sun was climbing higher. His gloves were dirty, his uniform smudged, but his face betrayed nothing. To anyone who saw him, Henry Clark was just a garbage man, finishing another day's work. Only he knew that buried deep beneath the city's waste was the end of a marriage, and the evidence of what he had done. For the first few days after Linda's disappearance, Henry maintained the image of a worried husband. He told anyone who asked that she had been gone when he came home from work, that maybe she had gone to two with friends after an argument. Neighbors expressed concern, offering to keep an eye out, while Linda's sister called the police to file a missing person report. Detectives visited the house, walking through each room, asking questions Henry had prepared for. He told them he left for work before sunrise, following his regular route until the landfill drop. His work log and GPS tracker matched the city's garbage collection records perfectly. It was an alibi built into the very structure of his job. The investigation began cautiously. Missing adults often turned up after a few days, and without signs of forced entry or struggle, the police had little to work with. Still, they interviewed friends, checked Linda's phone records, and pulled surveillance footage from around town. Henry kept his composure through it all, never straying from his story. The more days passed without a lead, the more confident he became that he had pulled it off. The landfill was a graveyard no one could ever fully search, and the compactor had done its work. Weeks slipped by and public interest began to fade. Then, almost by accident, a small detail emerged. A landfill worker, sorting through debris in a restricted section, noticed a large bundle partially crushed but entirely flattened. It had been buried deeper, but recent bulldozer work had shifted the pile, bringing it closer to the surface. The worker mentioned it casually to his supervisor, noting the heavy-duty plastic wrap and the odd shape. His supervisor, uneasy, reported it to the police. The search was grueling. Teams in protective suits combed through mounds of refuse under the harsh sun, enduring the stench and the slow, exhausting work of moving one pile at a time. On the third day, they found the bundle. It was badly damaged by the compactor, but enough remained for forensic teams to work with. Dental records confirmed it was Linda. Inside the wrapping, they found fragments of clothing that matched what she had been seen wearing in photographs taken just weeks earlier. When the detectives returned to Henry, they carried a different energy. They didn't tell him everything they had found, but they didn't need to. They already had enough to press him. At first he denied any involvement, clinging to his alibi. But when confronted with the evidence from the landfill, his confidence began to crack. The plastic wrapping was traced back to a specific supplier used by the waste management company materials Henry had access to. The pattern of his route, combined with the timing of Linda's disappearance, tightened the noose around him. Under the pressure, Henry eventually broke. The confession came not in bursts of emotion, but in a cold, mechanical retelling of events. He described the early morning, the wrapping, the compactor, and the lettuce. His words lacked remorse, as if he were simply recounting the steps of his job. To him, the plan had been perfect until chance intervened. The one thing he hadn't calculated was that a piece of the bundle would survive long enough to be found. The case stunned the community. People who had waved to Henry from their driveways now avoided speaking his name. The thought that the friendly garbage man had used his own truck as a murder weapon unsettled everyone. It wasn't just the brutality of the act, it was the methodical way he had turned a tool of daily life into something lethal. Henry Clark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the end, it wasn't technology, witness accounts, or even a confession that first set the investigation in motion. It was a landfill worker noticing something that didn't belong, a reminder that in a world full of discarded things, even the smallest detail can surface again, bringing buried secrets back into the light.